Those who are here, get on my left. Good evening. I'd like to call the City Council meeting of Monday, October 17, 2022 to order. If I can have our city clerk please call the roll. Present.
Present.
Councilman Noble is absent. Councilmember Dugo. Here. Councilmember Diaz. Here. Councilmember Bousquet.
Here.
And Mayor, we have a quorum.
Yeah, just before we do the pledge, I thought I saw Councilmember Noble outside. If I can have somebody go check on him, that would be great. Thank you. All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, moving on to the agenda approval. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion.
Second.
All right, I have a motion made by Councilmember Dugo, second by Deputy Mayor Tharp. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries 4-0. All right, moving on to comments from the public for agenda items only. Anyone wishing to speak on any agenda items, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, all right. Moving on to our special business, tonight we have a Palm Tran Bus Shelter Improvement Program, and we have the Executive Director of Palm Tran, Clinton Forbes, I just saw him walk in, presenting.
Mr. Mayor, council members, good evening. It's my pleasure to be here with you this evening, just to give you an update on Palm Tran and some of our projects, and end with an update on what we're doing with bus shelters, as I call them, street furniture, and how we want to coordinate with your beautiful city to make sure that we provide better coverage and amenities for our customers in Palm Beach County and Green Acres. So just to begin, just a snapshot of Palm Tran and how we serve the community. We serve all of Palm Beach County, including the Glades region. We essentially have three modes of transportation. So we have the fixed route bus, which is the 40-foot larger bus that you see on the road. We have paratransit service, which is a very important service for our elderly and disabled. That's the small cutaway gray van that you see sometimes probably in your neighborhood. And we have Go Glades, a relatively new service in the Glades community, and we'll talk a little bit more about that service. We all know that this is geography-wise, this is the largest county in one of the largest county in eastern United States. We provide, 6.2 million riders per year. That's down from about 10 million, pre-COVID. But we are in a steady increase in ridership post-COVID, sort of post-COVID, right? We learned that we have to live with this disease. So we serve all of Palm Beach County, as I mentioned. Just some of our major projects, our mission is to provide access to opportunity for everyone, safely, efficiently, and courteously. And we provide that access, with our bus operators and our bus fleet. And so on the left, you'll see our older bus that we still have a few of those in our fleet, but you can see that it was a little unimaginative. And we have moved now to a sleeker design, which is called a BRT style bus design. And that's the bus that you see, our diesel bus that you see mostly on the road. Our buses are smart buses. We have infotainment systems in our buses to give the customers information about the routes, about our services, and an automated wheelchair securement device. Again, we looked at more touchless options for our bus operators during COVID, and this was one of the adds that we added to the bus fleet. Another major project is our Paradise Pass. That's our, really it's raised the level of convenience for our customers. It's a smart fare collection system, state-of-the-art, that we recently installed, approaching a year now, November 14th. And, what this does is, I describe this system as, you should be able to approach the bus with anything on your person and be able to pay your fare. And so we want to take that question mark, that obstacle out of the equation on how do I pay my fare. And so if you have a credit card, you have an iPhone or an Android, you have cash, we still accept cash, you will be able to pay your fare with this system. And believe it or not, we have about 20,000 users on the system, and 15,000 are mobile users, and about 5,000 are smart card using the fare media. So we're really moving the needle with this system. I mentioned earlier, we have 3 modes. One of our modes is in the Glades region. It's the mobility on demand, which is another major project. This is something that's in our future plans for the eastern part of the community as well. Right now, it's in the western part of the community, and essentially, it has the cadence like Uber and Lyft. And so, sorry, didn't want to, all right, where am I going here? All right. Uh-oh, I am messing this thing up here, excuse me.
Can we reset?
Somebody, can we
reset
I don't know
the
if you can get me
presentation?
back to where I was, I'm sorry. And so as she prepares that, I just mentioned the Go Glades service is a door-to-door service in the Glades community that has the cadence like Uber and Lyft. You can hail the vehicles similar to how you hail Uber and Lyft. The ridership is just through the roof with this service. And so we will be looking at, areas within Palm Beach County, the eastern part of the county, where can we apply this service? It is a service approach that is just taking off around the country. Really mobility-type circulators in communities that connects to major nodes within the community, connects to our fixed route system. Thank you so much. We just recently launched the app. That's the ride-hailing app with the Mobility on Demand project in the Glades. And folks have become extremely adroit with this new technology. And there, if you want to just point your cameras to that screen, if you're an Apple phone user, that's the iTunes app. You can download the app there if you're ever in the Glades community, or just to see how it's very similar to Uber and Lyft. And Android users use Google Play if you're unfortunate to have an Android phone. Yeah, so we definitely have that. And the ridership, as I mentioned, has shot, just through the roof from just a little under 1,000 when we first started to 8,600 riders every month. So that's really exceptional ridership. And of course, we have a long-term vision at Palm Tran, our transit development plan. We were affectionately called Accelerate 2031. It's our 10-year plan, and we update it every 5 years. And the component of that plan really is, we're taking a 3-pronged approach, with our future at Palm Tran. Short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Short-term is to look for more, one of the issues, in this very beautiful community that we live in is a lot of it's guard-gated. We live in guard-gated communities. The access to our system, our bus system is not as easy. It's not a good, pedestrian-friendly trip to the bus stop. So we are going to implement first and last mile. So we'll be able to cover that first and last mile to our customers, getting from the doorstep of their home to the fixed route bus system. And, we'll partner with a Uber or a Lyft or a similar company to get that done. Midterm, we'd like to look at mobility on demand options similar to the Glades. And then long-term, look at more premium transit along major corridors. And that's, really the TPA's 561 plan. And of course, Mayor, you serve on the TPA, and that's essentially 5 corridors, north-south corridors, 6 east-west corridors, which really brings one connected system. And so we're looking at these corridors, as you see on the screen, for premium transit, something maybe like a bus rapid transit, and our vision for Okeechobee could potentially be a light rail. And of course, the future propulsion of our vehicles is electric. And so we have just completed our zero emissions plan for our fixed route fleet. And so we'll be moving to transition our vehicles to electric buses. And I think we are expecting to have delivery of our first electric buses in 2025 and be about 25% zero emission by 2032. And these are some of the vendors that, the bus builders that provide electric buses, and we've actually tested each of their buses in service a couple years ago. So we're looking forward to that project. And I'd like to introduce Yash Nagal, who's our interim director of transit planning, just to kind of briefly share with you some of the improvements that we have planned in your community for bus shelters and bus stops, and how we need to partner together to complete this really major project for our mutual customer.
Thank you, Mr. Forbes. Mayor, council members, as Mr. Forbes said, I'm Yash Nagal, the interim director of transit planning. Thank you for the opportunity to present there. So before I jump into bus stop land here, I want to give everybody a quick context of how we got started. In 2019, our TPA did a study for the bus shelter design. We considered that study, and in 2020, we put out a solicitation for buying new bus shelters and then installing them. But the way the contract was set up was it was a marketing and advertising model where you have companies that market, you give them the contract, they make revenue, you make revenue, and they put out the bus shelters throughout the community. The problem with that is they have a separate interest at heart. We have a separate interest at heart. So it doesn't really align with the way we want to put out our bus shelters, looking at ridership, things like that, so we have less control. So we did that in 2020. Unfortunately, we did not receive any proposals to that bid. So we went back to the drawing board, and then we tried to split up these proposals. So we ended up having a separate contract for purchasing these amenities and then having a separate mechanism to installing these amenities. And I'll kind of go over that as we move into this presentation too. So as you see, Mr. Forbes said, we go throughout the county. Specifically in your region, we have about 14 shelters, 7 benches, 13 pole-mounted seats, or as we call them, simi seats. What's special about these is, as you look in the picture, they can fit into a very tight right-of-way. Not a lot of acquisition required for it. Installation is pretty easy, and you have some place to sit, right at the pole. The mechanisms that we use in the city to maintain and install these shelters, of course, you all know that the city has its own shelter design, and you all maintain those. I believe you also have a mechanism for the private developers to sometimes put out these shelters as condition of approvals. So that's, and then at the bottom, you'll see the specific shelter design that you have. So this is the solicitation strategy that I was kind of referring to. Right now, we've broken our solicitations into 2 solicitations, one for buying the amenities, and then one for going out and only advertising on those, so we can still utilize the advertising revenue, which we can use in the future for maintenance of these bus stops, et cetera. We're also going to take help from our Facilities Development and Operations Department to install and construct these. A major part of these is the design and engineering, so they'll be providing us that service as well as the construction. We have somewhere north of $9 million in our grants to support these improvements, so we'll be able to utilize that money for this. We also, at the same time, have a ADA transition plan going on. As a part of this plan, we have our consultants doing the bus stop inventory, so they're finding out how many stops are ADA accessible, how many stops you can make improvement on, what stop requires what kind of improvement, how much right-of-way you need at what place. So they're basically preparing a priority list for us. So as soon as we're able to use the RFP to buy and install these things, we know exactly where they're going to go. The RFP for the purchase of these amenities will be out soon on the street in the coming months. Soon after that, we'll be able to engineer and design these, and then we hope for us to put the construction out for the first batch of these bus stops or bus shelters in summer of next year. So on the left side, you see the current shelter design that we have. We've had this design for almost 20 years now. On the right side, you see what we're going towards. That's just a prototype because we have not selected a vendor yet. I'm glad you like it. But you see, it's new, it's sleeker, it's newer. Similar to how we went from our old buses to new buses. We're adopting the new design, doing those sorts of things. And then we also have other amenities as part of this package. So we have the e-paper real-time info screens. These are 13, 14-inch screens that you can put on a bus stop. You can shoot, advertisements from it. You can do public announcements, things like that. Majorly, these are used by passengers to see when the next bus is approaching, things like that. We have sort of like the bigger interactive screens that can go on some of the stops. These would be predominantly at the higher ridership stops, since these are a larger investment. Semi seats that I talked about before. We have an option to put USB charging ports into the bus shelter and the bus stops. We have the LCD screen option that can go into some of the stops based on the ridership. Bike racks is a pretty obvious one. Solar lighting. We've felt the need just from hearing from the community and our bus operators to have some sort of lighting at the bus stop poles, especially at night. It's really tough for the operators to see, at which stops the passengers are or which stops they are not. Obviously, there's also a security aspect to it. So it's always good to have lighting at the bus stop. So that's what's going to help us in doing that. And then lastly, we also have an option for shaded seating. This is something newer that's come in the market. Similar to a semi-seat, it's easier to install, but it also has a little bit of shade. So this is sort of the middle ground between a semi-seat and a shelter, which we can utilize, in places where you don't have enough right-of-way to put necessarily a whole shelter out. As a part of our project, we divided all the bus stops into different levels. These levels were, the level selection criteria sort of was, what's around the bus stop, what's the usage, what is the capacity that the bus stop needs, what roadway it's on, what is the frequency going to be of the existing and the proposed route. One of the things that, you have to consider when you're placing a bus shelter is that if you're only waiting 15 minutes for the bus at that route, you might not necessarily need, a very big shelter because the waiting time at the place is not very high. Compared to if you're waiting for a route that's every 60 minutes, you might be at that stop for a longer period. So we considered things like that too in this improvement plan. As a part of our improvement plan, we also have we're also looking at replacing the top blade that we have, the bus stop signage. These are some of the options that we're looking at. Mr. Forbes will tell you that we at Palm Trend love QR codes. We understand that during COVID, the passengers have adopted and they've learned how to utilize QR codes very well. We want to make that as a part of our signs where they can just easily scan the code and they know where the next bus is, other relevant information, wherever we can take them to make their life more helpful. And this is a rendering of our future bus stop. So when we started this project, we called it a bus stop of the future. So this is sort of a rendering of our newer bus, our newer shelter, sort of the new sign, solar, the solar light, new trash cans, all of the amenities packed into just one rendering to sort of give an overview of what we're trying to go towards. Nice. Very nice. With that, I'll pass it back to Mr. Forbes.
Thank you, Yash. And of course, our project coordination team, which include Mr. Nagel, myself, Deborah Posey-Blocker, our legislative team. And so we want to coordinate closely, mayor and members, with your city to install these new shelters. And a part of, us providing our contact, we'd also like to know your contact and who we can coordinate closely with to get this project done. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your time.
Thank you. I know that you have been trying to get on my calendar, and I apologize that I haven't been able to get back to you, but I know that our city manager is interested in having that discussion with you, so maybe the three of us can coordinate. I think she's going to be your go-to contact. Is that correct, Andrea?
Yep. Great.
And do you have any business cards? Do you have her contact by any chance?
I'm sure we can get it.
I'll find you. I know where to find you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I know where to find you.
Are there any questions from the council? No, I mean, I love what you guys have been doing. This looks amazing. I know that ours look,
A little dated.
yeah, a little dated. So we would be very excited to see these throughout the city.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, so we are now going to our next presentation, which is the housing bond, and we have the chair of the Housing Leadership Council, Jack Weir, who's going to be presenting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council members, staff. Appreciate the opportunity to address you this evening. As the mayor indicated, I am president of Eastwind, which is a real estate company based in Palm Beach Gardens. And I'm here in my capacity as chairman of the Housing Leadership Council, which is a nonprofit housing advocacy group for workforce and affordable housing throughout Palm Beach County. So back in 2020, Housing Leadership Council partnered with Florida International University to do a housing needs assessment. We knew we had a housing problem, but the question was, what were the numbers? Let's try and get into the data and find out something. So what we found was that 57% of the renter households in the county, so nearly 100,000 households, were cost burdened. That meant they were paying more than a third of their income for rent. Another of that cohort, 30%, was basically paying over 50% of their income for that. So they were severely cost burdened. So that's over 50,000 households in the county. And even among owner-occupied households, over 30% were paying over 30% of their income for housing costs. When we dug a little deeper, we found out that one of the main reasons for this was from 2010 to 2019, if you looked at the population growth in the county, we should have been adding 6,300 units a year. That was basically the population growth divided by average household size. Instead, when we turned to the property tax rolls, we were only adding 4,200 units a year. So that resulted in a deficit of over 20,000 units cumulatively in that pre-pandemic decade of 2010 to 2019. So that's why we are where we are today, is we have a severe shortage of the supply of housing. The other thing I would add is that the situation got much worse with COVID. You had this population surge of people locating that could work remotely, and the financing market dried up in the first part of the pandemic, so supply slowed. So that led to what I would regard as really extraordinary rent and housing price increases. So on the rental side, from 2021 to 2022, the average rent in the county went up over 30%. So just to put that in perspective, if a developer does a pro forma, they'll usually project a 3% rent increase per year. So in effect, what you had was 10 years of rent increases compressed into a single year. On the home ownership side, the sale price of a home went up over 25%. And the median price of a home in Palm Beach County briefly crested over $600,000 before settling back at around $550,000. Wow. So the result is essential workers are priced out. and that's what you see on the slide, is a teacher, even married, two-teacher household, doesn't really have a chance to buy a house because the housing prices are so high relative to the income. But across the board, nurses, firefighters, first responders, other government workers, other essential workers, they are effectively blocked from home ownership and they have to stretch for rental. So the result of this, what you see is lots of closings. Restaurants have cut back hours, shops have closed, lots of vacancies. The thing that I would point out here is it's not just a housing issue for the residents that are impacted. It's a business issue for all businesses in the county that are looking to retain their employees or attract others. So what can we do about this? So the solution that is on the ballot on November 8th, and those of you who have voted early, you've already seen this, is a vote for a housing bond for $200 million, which would be a general obligation bond to Palm Beach County. And the reason it's a Palm Beach County bond is you have a certain economy of scale. If the county issues the bond, it's paid for ultimately by all the tax-paying households of the county, and it can be used anywhere in the county, including in the municipalities. You wouldn't want to have a series of smaller bond issues in municipalities. That would be inefficient and raise transaction costs. So you have one master bond issue that can be used anywhere in the county. The legal language is a little intimidating, but basically it's a 20-year bond, and it would be used to make loans for the development of workforce and affordable housing. So the goal is to increase supply. The incomes are up to 140% of the area median income for Palm Beach County. So that means you're helping households on the rental and the home ownership side up to $128,000. So the problem is that severe that households earning over $100,000 are being severely impacted by this. And the goal is to increase the supply. That's the reference to the 20,000 units. So the goal of the program is to produce 20,000, well, it's twofold. One is to increase the supply of housing overall, and then the second is to increase the supply of workforce and affordable housing as a proportion of the overall housing increase. The way the bond would work is as gap financing. So for a rental development, a conventional rental development would be financed with a construction loan that might be 65% of the cost, and equity that might be 35% of the cost. The equity is very expensive money. You have to satisfy investors who are looking at 15, 18, 20% annual rates of return. So what the bond would do would be it would substitute for the expensive equity and basically lower the cost of capital for the entire project. So it would be a second subordinate loan. In return, the developer commits to set aside a proportion of the units in the rental development as workforce housing that are below market levels. If they are at 100% of median income, the loan would be at one level. If it's at 80% of median income, it would be at a higher level. And if it's at 60% of median income, the loan for that unit would be at a higher level. So the loan amount is tied to the affordability of the unit. The bonds are for 20 years, but the restriction lasts 30 years. And if the project is sold during that period, the loan has to be repaid, but the restriction continues. So the idea is to recycle the loan proceeds. On the home ownership side, the goal is to fill the gap between the cost of production and the sale price of a workforce housing unit. So let's just say that a home costs $270,000 to build, and the workforce housing sales price at the 80% AMI was $220,000. The goal would be to fill that $50,000 gap with bond proceeds so the home could be built and then turned over to a first-time home buyer. So it's a classic gap filler there. This is a financing mechanism. It doesn't override or impinge on the rights of a municipality to govern its entitlement process, to review applications, development applications, to run them through a public hearing process, to ask questions. So it's designed to make the housing more feasible, but the housing approval or the development approval process would remain the same. We have provided in the housing plan, which I'll refer to later, some ideas on how the process can be expedited, but it's financing, it's different from approvals. One of the questions that we sometimes get after we do these presentations is, where would these units go? Sounds like a lot of units. So, several different locations. One of them is going to be what we would term major commercial corridors that can accommodate density. So there is a minimum of 25% of the bond proceeds that would be used for home ownership, but many of the bond proceeds will be used for rental developments. So major commercial corridors near shopping, employment centers, schools, these would be prime candidates. An especially targeted area will be what we would term commercial properties that can be redeveloped. So these would be aging shopping centers that could be repurposed as mixed-use developments with a residential component. It would be offices where you have these large flat parking lots. The office building could be retained, a parking structure could be put up, and part of the parking lot could be used for residential. And then old hotels, and even uses as diverse as churches and bowling alleys could potentially be repurposed. We are, though we're a large county, we do not have an abundance of developable land, so it's going to be important for us to be resourceful in redeveloping on the land that we have. Another area would be urban cores, transit-oriented developments. This is more likely to be the case in a place like West Palm Beach. And then finally, what we would term historically disadvantaged neighborhoods or disinvested neighborhoods. These are neighborhoods that have not had a lot of real estate investment in the past. And so the goal, and this is particularly, we think, a prime area for home ownership, is to purchase vacant lots and to develop on them, to redevelop other areas, and basically to expand the developmental footprint to neighborhoods that have historically been disinvested. And I'll talk a bit more about that with the housing plan. How much would this cost? So $4.36 per county calculations for $100,000 of assessed value. So that's what it would cost on an annual basis. For the median price assessed home, that would be $14 a year, so a little bit over $1 a month. We think it's a small price to pay for something that would benefit so many essential workers in the community. And the thing to note here is, if you say, well, median price $550, $436 for assessed value, your assessed value is not the same as your market value. You have to lump off the homestead exemptions. There is generally a lag between reassessments and where the market goes, particularly in a fast-moving market like this. And of course, due to Save Our Homes, if you've been in your home for a long time, your assessment hasn't gone up as much as someone who just bought their home as well. So the county factored that into the calculations, and that's what we came up with. And so because the cost is spread over such a broad pool, the amount per individual tax-paying household is very modest. A couple of the safeguards to note here. One is that every loan is going to be backed not only with a mortgage, but with a deed restriction. So it'll be a matter of public record that the housing that is constructed here has a deed restriction with regard to the rent and the income. For the rental developments, there is a annual compliance monitoring report that is due. So it needs to be turned either into the county, the city, or if a city designates or municipality designates a third-party credit underwriter paid for by the developer, to ensure that if a developer says you're getting 20% workforce housing units at this level, that in fact is the case. So there's a built-in compliance mechanism to it. And then there is a notice of sale requirement both for the rental projects and also the single family, so that the applicable provisions of the deed restriction can be enforced. And finally, the county will be responsible for administering the allocation of the bonds proceeds through various requests for proposals. But the Housing Leadership Council will also be providing oversight to ensure that the program is meeting its goals and encourage the county to change course if it's not meeting its goals. The housing bond is not going to get 20,000 units. It's not going to solve the problem totally. It's going to make a significant dent in it. The housing bond is part of an overall housing plan, which is being produced and which has been produced, and the county plans to adopt it shortly after the bond vote. So there are 4 components. There's funding and financing, of which the bond is one element, but there's a couple other elements as well. The county has a workforce housing in lieu payment fee where home builders who have opted out of building the units on site pay into a fund. And that fund is built up to a considerable balance. The reason is because the outflows from the fund are restricted to housing units, for sale housing units produced in the county for the workforce housing program. The housing plan urges, and the county has agreed, to use it for any unit meeting the workforce housing price requirements anywhere in the county, including in any municipality, so that there's a significant source of second mortgage funds for home ownership that comes from this. We've also urged the creation by either a local nonprofit or a local government entity of what we call a cash buyer fund, which is modeled after a program in Cincinnati. Right now, if a homeowner is looking to sell its property, its choices are often between a cash buyer, usually an investor who wants to rent out the property, or someone who's qualified for a mortgage, qualified for a second mortgage from the government, and they can get it done, but it will take longer and there are more contingencies. Often the homeowner will opt for the easy money from the cash buyer. So the goal is to basically set up a competing cash buyer with a revolving loan fund from local lenders, and to use those funds to purchase houses, rehab them potentially, and then turn around and sell them to first-time home buyers. So it's hoped that, with that program, it'll promote not only home ownership, but also neighborhood revitalization as well. And the third part of the plan is to fund a philanthropic initiative to boost the capacity of nonprofit, mission-oriented developers to be able to do more housing. Second part of the plan is planning and regulatory reform. It talks about things like more density in appropriate locations, facilitating the redevelopment that I talked about as one of the locations for the housing, and seeing what can be done to speed up permitting and inspections. So one of the models that's been employed in other jurisdictions in which we work is the use of a certified third-party private provider if the county or the city is short-staffed with either building officials or inspectors. So that's one way to speed up the process. Neighborhood revitalization, I've touched on briefly. And so the goal there is to come up with areas, and it's the historic core between the FEC Railroad and Route 1 and other communities, but to basically try and couple housing investment with more local government infrastructure investment, better schools, public safety, and to try and work on neighborhoods that are already experiencing growth and try and facilitate that process. One of the keys there is to have a plan for this, because we don't want reinvestment in these neighborhoods to become a trigger for displacement of existing residents on a large scale. So you want to encourage the investment, but you also want to come up with a way to help the existing residents stay in place. And then the last is a racial equity component, which is designed to identify obstacles, historic obstacles to black home ownership. We've identified financing as one and measures that can be done to address that, valuation issues, and also legal issues so that property can be passed on to the next generation without running into legal heirs issue, titles, or other issues as well. Last slide, this is some of the groups that have invested, endorsed the housing bond. It is a broad spectrum of groups. It is housing advocates, it is labor unions, it is business groups, it is civic organizations. So, we hope that, the combination of the presentations we're doing and the campaign that we are raising will help achieve a positive vote. And with that, I appreciate the opportunity to address you and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, for your time. At this time, are there any comments or questions from the council? Councilmember Dugo.
I do. I may have misunderstood, so I wanted to clarify. The 20,000 units, did I misunderstand that only 25% of those would be allocated for home ownership and the remaining would be leasing?
Now, there's one of the questions that came up in the discussion was whether there would be the funds would be used for rental housing. So what we did was we established a floor that no less than 25%. So it's a floor, but it's not a cap. What I would tell you is this is a developer-driven process. They'll be making applications. The goal here is to harness the private sector to develop more of this type of housing. The county's not going to build it. There's no other force that's going to build it. So the goal is to harness the private sector to do it.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Tharp and then Councilmember Diaz.
Thank you. That was very informative. Just the part that you had mentioned, there's a percentage of homes that are going to be reserved for workforce housing. Is that same 25%, or like, is there a minimum that a builder has to allocate to workforce housing in this program?
It will probably wind up being about 20% of the. So there are several different types of developments that are being targeted. So one would be a conventional market project, like you would see, 100% market housing. And the goal would be to incentivize the developer to provide 20% of the units in that as workforce housing. It's what we would call mixed income housing. One thing I want to emphasize is none of this is substandard housing. This is all housing that I would live in, I would hope you would live in. It's designed to be market, first class in terms of what it's done. This is a financing mechanism. Second type would be what I would call smaller developers, nonprofits. That would have a higher percentage of workforce housing. Those deals haven't been economically feasible up to this point, and the idea is the bond issue would make them feasible as well. The third would be affordable housing deals. So one of the things that happened this last year is the state legislature took $100 million out of the SALE program, which is the subordinate mortgage program that's used for developments that employ tax-exempt bonds and 4% tax credits. So that meant that Palm Beach County would only get maybe one project, if any. And so the idea is the bond proceeds could actually be used as a sale substitute second mortgage gap financing so that Palm Beach County would get a greater number of those. So the bonds are there, the credits are there, but there's no gap financing. This would give Palm Beach County a leg up. And the thing I would emphasize is the 60% AMI now is up to almost 50,000. So you have starting teachers and others that actually would fall into that category as well. And then the last category would be neighborhood revitalization, smaller scale. So a lot of these, I think, will be for sale. They will be single-family cottage homes. They will be duplexes. They will be townhomes. There was an article in the New York Times a couple weeks ago about the demise of starter homes back from when we were younger. And the goal of this is to help make those type of homes economically feasible again. And again, promote neighborhood revitalization as well.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Diaz.
Actually, Councilmember Dugo had my first question, but I do have a couple of more. I just wanted to clarify as well. I heard you mention gap financing. Now, did I hear correctly that it would be solely for first-time home buyers?
I did mention first-time home buyers in there, and that will probably be a target group because the goal is to try and increase home ownership, move from rental to home ownership. I can't tell you that it will be strictly limited to that. Is there a scenario you're thinking of?
No, I'm just wanting to see, I want to see if it's a scenario where it's not limited to that. I feel that this is part of the issue that we're facing, is there are people that have already owned homes, life circumstances, or maybe they lost their homes and now are looking at a rental situation. So I just wanted to see, is it strictly for first-time home buyers, or is there an opportunity for someone to come back into homeownership through this program?
Yeah, I think the scenario you said where they were homeowners and then they were now rental and they want to purchase a home again, I think that would be permitted.
Okay. And then my other one is, I heard you mention deed restriction. Can you mention a little bit more about that? Is the deed restriction perpetual? And if it's not, when would it sunset and what then?
On the home ownership side.
Correct. Or
So-
the developer side that is renting it out? What does that restriction look like? Or my question to that, and the reason I ask is, are we moving the cheese? Are we going to look at this 20 years from now and these provisions that maybe were put in place sunset, and then these rentals start, escalating in cost again?
Well, so the deed restriction on the rental side would be 30 years. So on affordable projects like the ones I just mentioned with sale that have funding from Florida Housing Finance Corporation, it would be 50 years. So after 30 years, there is no longer any deed restriction on the rental property. And part of the reason we're in the situation we're in is the shortage of supply. And I would expect that some of the developments produced here would be, even if they're not deed restricted, that they would help address the supply issue here. So it is, to some degree, an economic analysis where we want to increase the amount of supply, and even units that are not deed restricted help with the overall problem. So that's on the rental side. On the home ownership side, what the county has proposed is a 30-year non-recurring deed restriction. So what that means is if you purchase a home through the program and you sell it during that period, you can only sell it to another household who's in the same income bracket, and the price at which you can sell it is limited by the appreciation of the income in that income bracket between when you bought it and when you sold it. So if it is an 80% AMI household that you buy it now, and in year 5 you sell it, to the extent that incomes have gone up, you get some equity back and do that, but it's restricted until 30 years. After 30 years, then it's unrestricted.
Thank you.
All right, I have a couple of questions, Jack. The first one, when you say, "I think that will be allowed," to answering Councilmember Diaz's question, who is going to compose this oversight committee?
So we, when I say we, meaning Housing Leadership Council, have met with the county staff over a list of bond allocation criteria. And we've taken it to a point where there's general consensus, but there's some open questions. And the idea at that point was, well, let's suspend the discussions now, let's wait for the vote to occur, and then let's get back into this. And we think it's very important, and the county has agreed, that there would be a public comment element to this bond allocation criteria before it's boiled down into specific requests for proposals. So, so the question that was just posed about, going from home ownership, then you rent into home ownership, hadn't come up before. So that's a good question, and it needs to be considered. So that's the type of thing that would do it. So there's nothing that's really locked in yet. So, so there will be a public comment on that before it goes into specific requests for proposals. The other one right now, the oversight is being proposed by the Housing Leadership Council, which would need to hire another staff person in order to do it. It can't just be Suzanne Cabrera, adding that to her already busy list of things to do. So I don't know if that's going to be the final result. We may have to shift to a formal oversight committee, like with the sales tax infrastructure, where it's just an assortment of community leaders who have gone on there, including local government representatives. I mean, there are local government representatives both at the elected official and the staff level on the Housing Leadership Council, but that's how I envision it would occur.
Can you explain what assessed value is versus market value for those people? Because you put up there $4.36, and that equates to about $14 a year.
Right, and you were looking at the median home price, and you were multiplying, and you're over $20, right?
Well, I just want to make sure that people understand. So if you could expand on that.
Yeah, so assessed value is what's on your property tax bill when you get it in November. And the assessed value is different from the market value for 3 reasons. The first reason is we have exemptions if you own your home. So you have homestead exemptions. For many, it is a $50,000 exemption, which comes off the top in terms of the assessed value. The second is Save Our Homes, which is a Florida statute, restricts the increase in your assessed value to 3% a year. So if you've been in your home for an extended period of time, home prices have appreciated more than 3%. So there's a lag between where your assessed value is and what the market value of your home is. And then the third reason is homes are only assessed periodically. So there's going to be a lag between what the assessed value is in a year like the last year where the market value went up so high as well. We wanted to get the numbers, and the county's Department of Budget and Finance ran the number as to what this would cost when the bonds were issued. So the numbers that I'm presenting to you are based on their analysis.
Excellent. And I know that you've been leading this charge for a while. What happens if we can't create the inventory that through this bond? What's the implication to our community?
Well, one of the reasons why we've put the bond as a proposal is because of our frustration with Tallahassee. I mean, as you know, Palm Beach County has got a larger population in 11 states. We are a donor county. We send the tax dollars up there, and we don't get the same. I mean, South Florida generally is an economic engine. And it's been made worse by the fact that the Housing Trust Fund has been raided year after year. I mean, even in the midst of this housing crisis, they took $100,000 from the SAIL program, proven program, reg staff ready to go, into a new Hometown for Heroes program. We have no issue with Hometown for Heroes. It's a great idea, but they didn't need to rob Peter to pay Paul to pay the program. So part of this is trying to control our destiny. There are no guarantees. We've been careful not to overpromise. This is not going to be a program that will be focused on extremely low-income households. This is a scale production program to try and address the housing supply, the shortage of housing supply. So I think if we've done this and we're seeing what the result will be, I think we calibrate the program. I mean, being smart is good, but being persistent is a key to success. So I think if we get the bonds and it's not producing the desired results, then we've got to recalibrate the program and figure out what to do and how we can do it and what else can be done on the permitting and regulatory side or some other side. So, I mean, I think it gives us a very valuable tool that will make a significant dent in the problem.
Excellent. Jack, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks. All right, we're going to our next presentation, City Government Week, and we have our Youth Program Supervisor, Adam Mohammed.
Good evening, everyone. This is, for the record, this is Adam Mohammed, and like Mayor Flores said, I'm Adam Mohammed. I'm with the City of Green Acres Youth Programs Department, and currently I supervise the elementary school age program. And I just want to thank everyone for stopping by today and for us being able to receive this proclamation for City Government Week. City Government Week is something I've been part of for such a long time, and every year we like to commit to doing new projects. This year, we're working very closely with Fire Rescue to do a couple of demonstrations, so we want to thank Mr. Fuller and thanking the council again for this presentation, or for this proclamation. So thank you.
I want to read it into the record, so if I can have our city clerk please read the proclamation.
Proclamation of the City Council of the City of Green Acres proclaiming the week of October 17th through the 23rd, 2022 as Florida City Government Week. City government is the government closest to the people and the one with the most direct daily impact upon the residents. Florida City Government Week is a very important time to recognize the significant role played by city government in our lives to spread the word to all Floridians that they can shape and influence the levels of government which is closest to the people. Therefore, the City of Green Acres do hereby proclaim October 17th through the 23rd, 2022 as Florida City Government Week and encourage all city officials to support this celebration by participating in the My City, I'm Part of It, I'm Proud of It activities. Thank you.
And just to introduce them, I'm sorry, they're a little shy, but these are our directors, because we have a little teen advisory council where we have directors that simulate city departments. So we also have our own director of public works, of city manager's office, city clerk, who also help with tasks around the facility. And I know they're a little shy, and this isn't all of them, but these are some of our directors that help youth programs run, and hopefully will be directors in the city one day.
Yay. Yay.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
All right, I have a motion made by Councilmember Busquet, second by Councilmember Diaz. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries 5-0. All right, we're now moving to a regular agenda. Our next item is a public hearing for Ordinance 2022-33, second reading. If I can have the city clerk, please read the ordinance by title.
Ordinance 2022-33, second reading, repealing Chapter 8, License and Business Regulations, Article 3, Business Taxes, Section 8-74, Conversion Therapy Prohibited, providing for conflict severability, codification, and an effective date and for other purposes.
All right, I have our city manager, Andrew McHugh, and our city attorney, Christy Godot, presenting.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. In a recent case against Boca Raton and Palm Beach County, the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit found that the city of Boca Raton's prohibition on conversion therapy to be unconstitutional restriction on speech in violation of the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Through the city's Ordinance 2017-15, the city's Code of Ordinances similarly prohibits the practice of conversion therapy on any minor within the city. The city recognizes the potential impacts of the court's decision, and therefore it's prudent to repeal Section 8-74 of the city's Code of Ordinances. The ordinance was presented on first reading on September the 28th and was approved 4-1. The city attorney has prepared the ordinance and all supporting documents, and staff is recommending approval of Ordinance 2022-33 on second reading.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the council? Seeing none at this time, I'd like to open public hearing for Ordinance 2022-33. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the ordinance, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the ordinance, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, public hearing is now closed.
Make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-33 on second reading.
Second.
All right, I have a motion made by Deputy Mayor Tharp, second by Councilmember Busquet. All in favor?
Aye.
Councilmember Diaz, adding.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries 5-0. All right, our next item is Resolution 2022-58. We have an opposing conversion therapy on minors, making findings and providing for an effective date. We have our city manager, Andrew McHugh, presenting.
Thank you again. This resolution is accompanying the ordinance that was just recently passed by the council. And with this one, the city council recognizes the potential impacts of the court's decision and as a result has repealed Section 8-74 of the city's Code of Ordinances, but maintains the position that conversion therapy on minors is a practice that is contrary to the community standards to which Green Acres aspires, and finds that opposing the practice of conversion therapy on minors is in the best interest of the citizens and residents of the city. Staff is recommending approval of Resolution 2022-58.
All right, at this time, are there any comments or questions from the council? Deputy Mayor Tharp.
Actually, I just wanted to make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-58.
Second.
All right, are there any other comments or questions? No, all right, so I have a motion made by Deputy Mayor Tharp, second by Councilmember Dugo. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to public hearing for ordinance 2022-34, second reading. If I can have our city clerk, please read the ordinance by title.
Ordinance 2022-34, second reading, amending the City of Green Acres budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021, and ending September 30, 2022, inclusive, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
All right, and we have our Director of Finance, Terry Berger, presenting.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Terry Berger, Director of Finance. Ordinance 2022-34 was presented to City Council on September 29th in first reading. There has been no changes from the first reading to the second reading. Staff is recommending approval of Ordinance 2022-34.
All right, do we have, does the council have any comments or questions? Seeing none, I'd like to open public hearing 2022-34. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the ordinance, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition of the ordinance, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. All right, public hearing is now closed.
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2022-34 on second reading.
Second.
All right, I have a motion made by Councilmember Diaz, second by Councilmember Busquet. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion.
Yeah.
All right, that motion carries 5-0. All right, we're moving on to ordinance 2022-29, first reading. If I can have City Clerk, please read the ordinance by title.
Ordinance 2022-29, first reading, amending Chapter 12 subdivisions and land development regulations, Article 3, improvements and design standards, Section 12-58, drainage by adding subsection 12-58K, imposing drainage requirements between properties, providing for repeal of conflicting ordinances, severability, inclusion in code, and an effective date.
Thank you. And we have our zoning administrator, Karen Gardner-Young, presenting.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. This is a zoning text amendment which principal intent is to address stormwater impacts upon a neighbor's property. Scott Woods, to my left, is the city building official, and he's here tonight to explain the need for ZTA 22-13. But before I turn it over to Scott, I just want to read some items into the record. First of all, ZTA 22-13 was presented to the Development Review Committee on September 9th, 2022. No objections were received. Since this is not an amendment to Chapter 12 or Chapter 16 of the Zoning Code, you do not have a Planning Zoning Board of Appeals recommendation for you tonight. The city attorney and the contract city engineer have reviewed ZTA 22-13, and both had no objections to what is being presented to you tonight. Further, we ask that everything in the city's records be included as part of the public record. Staff is recommending approval of ZTA 22-13 through Ordinance 2022-29. This is first reading, and I will turn it over to Scott.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Seems like every time I talk to you guys, we're talking about flooding somewhere. So one of the problems we have in certain areas in town is runoff basically runs off, she flows off property onto neighbor's property. And so we talked to builders, and they build little wooden dams, so to speak, out of pressure-treated lumber to try and retain the water onto their property, their own property, like they're supposed to according to the building code and our floodplain regulations. The only real change in our ordinance is that we're proposing that they build either a perimeter berm around their property that would retain the water on site, or if they cannot accommodate a perimeter berm, they're required to build a concrete block wall. Doesn't have to be super high, just has to be high enough that it prevents the water from running off of their property onto the neighbor's property. It's an issue because we're building houses higher and higher because we have certain areas affected by flood zones. Some cases, county won't allow them to put their septic too low, so the house becomes a little bit higher. So it's been kind of an ongoing property. It's really just the only major change of the ordinance. Everything else is pretty much the same. And if you guys have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them.
Thank you. Are there comments or questions from the council? Deputy Mayor Tharp.
I think we all saw what happened on the west coast of Florida and how important it is. I mean, they got flooded in areas they never thought they would get flooded in. So anything that we can do to help, I appreciate you bringing this forward. That's all that I have.
Motion to approve 2022-29.
Second.
Is there any other comments or questions? No. All right. I have a motion made by Councilmember Dugo, second by Deputy Mayor Tharp. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to Resolution 2022-56. If I can have the city clerk please read the resolution into the record.
Resolution 2022-56, adopting a fee schedule for code compliance and establishing a property enhancement grant program account, providing for appeal of conflicts and an effective date.
And we have our city manager, Andrew McHugh, presenting.
Thank you, Mayor. The city currently administers a code compliance program in accordance with Chapter 162 of the Florida statutes. In administering the program, the city incurs administrative costs when imposing a lien, processing of applications for lien reductions, release of liens, and partial release of liens. The city would like to establish fees to offset some of the administrative costs and establish a property enhancement grant program account where a portion of the code compliance fees will be deposited and offset the cost of the property enhancement grant program. The city will not assess an administrative fee for a property owner's violation which is brought into compliance within the time frame either set by the city or the special magistrate. From a fee perspective, the $75 fee will be imposed for each case in which a code compliance lien is opposed. And then there is $150 fees which would be imposed for the application for the fine or lien reduction, application for release of lien order, or application for partial release of lien. The $150 fee does include the $75 administrative costs when a code compliance lien is imposed, so it really is essentially $75 for each one of those categories. 5% of the code compliance fees, fines, liens, and other charges paid to the city will go into the Property Enhancement Grant Program account with the intent of assisting homestead property owners seeking to improve the overall appearance of their properties within the city. The city manager may recommend to the city council changes in the use of funds, but any changes would be in the form of a resolution. Staff is recommending approval of Resolution 2022-56.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the council?
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-56.
Second.
All right, I have a motion made by Councilmember Bousquet, second by Councilmember Dugo. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to Resolution 2022-59. If I can have our city clerk, please read the resolution into the record.
Resolution 2022-59, approving the acquisition of real property and providing authorization for city officials to execute all closing documents and an effective date.
Thank you. And we have our city manager, Andrew McHugh, presenting.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. The city, as of course all of you know, the city has grown significantly over the last 20 years, and to ensure that we're able to meet the needs of the community, expansion of services and supporting facilities is necessary. The city entered into a contract for the acquisition of 2 contiguous unincorporated parcels of approximately 8.69 acres adjacent to the city's parcel at 5800 Melaleuca Lane, which is ideal for the expansion of city services and supporting facilities. The agreed-to contracted price for the two parcels is $3 million. Two appraisals were obtained consistent with Section 166.045 of the Florida statutes, which concluded that the average market value of the parcels is $2.27 million. Both appraisals appear to have decreased the overall market value of the parcels due to the concern with the lack of direct legal access to the parcels and the presence of fuel storage tanks. Direct access is not an issue for the city, as the city has direct access to the parcels through the city's parcel, and the city also conducted Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental assessments which found no concerns with the soil or groundwater from the tanks. Acquiring the parcels above the market value is necessary given the current real estate market in Palm Beach County, the ideal location of the parcels, the city's direct access, and having additional real property adjacent to the City Hall complex for the expansion of city services and supporting facilities will provide beneficial to the continuity and continuation of necessary city services as the community continues to grow. Again, the total cost for the two parcels, the contract price is $3 million. The city attorney has prepared and reviewed the resolution and all supporting documents for legal sufficiency and compliance, and staff is recommending approval of Resolution 2022-59.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the council? Councilmember Noble.
Is that two pieces that are next to our property? Is that
Correct. That's almost 9 acres right adjacent to City Hall back near Public Works. That's where those 9 acres are located.
Any other comments or questions from the council?
My only comment is I really think this is a good investment for Green Acres' future.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-59.
Second.
All right, so I have a motion made by Councilmember Bousquet, second by Councilmember Tharp. Any other comments or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, this motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to our next item, ratification of the Charter Review Committee appointments. I believe we're appointing 9 members to serve a 3-year term, and we have our city manager, Andrew McHugh, presenting.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution 201926 established the Charter Review Committee, and it does have a total of 9 members appointed and approved by the mayor and city council. The membership is comprised of 6 members appointed by the mayor, city council, 1 city employee, 1 representative of Local 2928, and 1 local business owner. In your packets, the following appointees were being recommended for ratification by the city council. Deputy Mayor Thart's recommendation was Olga Sierra. Councilmember Peter Nobles was Larry Tronco. Councilmember Judy Dugo was Emily Jacob Robarts. Councilmember Susie Diaz was Mal Colton. Councilmember Paula Bousquet is Charles Shaw. City employee is Benjamin Dexter, who is also a resident of the city. Local 2928 representative is Peter Tyler Walwork, and city business owner is Chris Arbor from Green Acres Bowl. As noted in the staff memo, per Council Policy 29, if a member is eligible for reappointment, the city clerk will contact the member to see if the member wishes to continue to serve. Those noted in the item summary with an asterisk are all members who have previously served that wish to continue to serve. So the memo, the staff is recommending ratification of the Charter Review Committee appointments.
Quick question, is my appointment on there?
No, I didn't receive any.
Oh, I thought I told you Annette Thomas.
No, the information was that potentially, but I never got any information finalizing her on it.
So what do we got to do to add her?
I can reach out on that and send the information on that. That's not
Okay,
a problem.
perfect.
And then we'll just bring that one back. It's no problem.
Excellent.
Motion to approve ratification of Charter Review Committee appointments.
Second?
The committee.
All right, I have a motion made by Councilmember Bousquet, second by Councilmember Diaz. Any other comments or questions? No? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that motion carries 5-0. All right, moving on to our discussion item tonight, naming of city events, programs, and facilities. City Manager Andrew McHugh.
Thank you, Mayor. I am not going to go into all the detail of the analysis in the report that was provided as part of your packets, but just for some background, the council did discuss during the scholarship program, when the council approved the city scholarship program for the previous fiscal year, naming of scholarships led to a larger discussion about how the city should go about naming city-related programs, events, and/or facilities. The city was interested in having a policy and/or procedure in place to assist in determining how programs, events, facilities, including property, are named. Included in your packets is some analysis, some recommended information. If the council desires, we can bring back something for council's consideration and approval on the regular agenda based on the information that was provided in the item summary.
All right. Is there any comments or questions from the council?
I would like to see it brought back in a more defined manner. I think it's important that we do this, that people just don't come up with reasons to name a park, a scholarship out of thin air. So, yes, I think we should go forward.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Tharp?
I would agree with Councilmember Bousquet, and then just a thought, I'd like some consideration if we could have, I don't want to say a super majority, but 4/5 majority for renaming or appointing something, just so we have I don't want to say, again, a super majority, but I'd be more comfortable with a 4/5 majority on that.
I agree.
Yeah, I will also agree that we should have some criteria that we put forth so that we can, so nothing can, can be questioned later in time, and if we have something that's uniform across the board, I think it makes this election process a little bit easier, so. Anyone else?
I agree.
Okay.
Mayor, I have just a question. In terms of bringing this back in a more formal type of manner, there's a couple ways from a legal standpoint that we could do that. You can do it obviously through a council policy. You could do that through a resolution, or you could do that through an ordinance. Obviously, if you do it through an ordinance, to change it, it takes, 2 readings. If you did it by resolution or council policy, it'd just take, a motion at a meeting. So I don't know what the pleasure of the council is in that regard.
I would venture to say an ordinance, so, but I'll look for consensus from the council, so,
Ordinance.
Councilor Noble,
I agree. Ordinance.
Ordinance.
ordinance it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. This time, we're moving on to comments from the public on non-agenda items. Anyone wishing to speak on any issues, please feel free to come forward. State your name and address for the record.
Roy Gable, 329 C2, Knotty Pine Circle. Wish to speak on Ordinance 30413-3, shutters and impact protection. Fire chief gave us a rundown on what it says, and he said he changed remove to open. And he's talking about fire. And I leave for 3 months, and I have accordion shutters. There is sufficient airflow if I open a window with the shutters closed to support anything. The other item is, it is by building and not by apartment. and there's fire breaks between apartments. And I believe it says all shutters and impact protection have to be removed 14 days after a hurricane. And you're issuing impact windows, permits for them. So after reading the ordinance as it reads now, it's very bad, and you could change it any way you want. So what do I do? That would be the question. I believe you need to rewrite it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? All right. Moving on to our city manager's report. City Manager Andrew McHugh.
Thank you, Mayor. We had a great turnout Saturday for our cleanup. I want to thank our code supervisor. She did a fantastic job setting it up. Unfortunately, the weather did cut it a little short, but I think we got a lot done in a very short period of time, so looking forward to the next one. Thanks so much to everyone that came out to help with that. The trunk or treat, that was something that wasn't planned for a very long time, but my goodness, there was a huge turnout for that. I think that we had a lot of residents from the original section that participated. The thought was maybe, over 1,000 people came, that to the event. So it went off really well. So everyone was really excited about that. So thanks so much to PBSO and our CRS department for all that they did to put that together. Recently, and I don't know if you noticed coming in, there's toy drive boxes in the lobby. They are going to be placed in different locations. We have contacts at Estero Fire Department. Recently learned that 14 of their firefighters, including their fire chief, they've all lost their homes. Their fire chief is currently living in the fire station. So we know, there are so many that have been displaced, but one of the things that we were thinking, while there is going to be a lot of assistance through the Florida Disaster Relief Fund, we were thinking that maybe we do some kind of toy drive for families. And, our public information officer has put information together. Some of our partners in the city are going to be also collecting toys as well. So we are going to be doing that through the 2nd of December. So we hope that that information can get out there and people will donate toys. And our fire rescue is going to be delivering those toys over to the West Coast sometime after December 2nd. Just as a reminder, our comp plan meetings are next week on the 26th and the 29th. The 26th, is next week the 26th? Yes. The 26th from 6 to 7:30 p.m., the 29th from 10 to 11:30 a.m., and they will be at the community center. This is a very important process for those that are interested in contributing, and that is our city staff, our directors, our residents, all of those interested in providing information and thoughts and asking questions about Green Acres and what we should look like in the next 15, 20, 25 years. It's very important to attend one of these meetings because it is a document that we're going to be putting together based on a lot of that information that we'll be receiving and what we'll be hearing from those that attend. Read for the record, that is on the 27th. We need volunteers. We have a lot of interested schools, daycares that would like readers. So if there is an interest or if someone wants more information about that, they can contact Michelle, our Director of Community and Recreation Services, and she can provide that information. And then last, for City Government Week, our City Attorney, Attorney Godot, will be presenting tomorrow, and PBSO will also be presenting at the L.C. Swain Pre-Law Academy. And again, Fire Rescue will be doing some work with some of the kids in our program as well. So we're really grateful for that. That's all I have.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions for our city manager? Seeing none, moving on to our city attorney, Chrissy Godot.
I do not have a report tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving on to the mayor and city council's report. I don't remember where I started last week, so I'll start with the deputy mayor, Tharp.
Thank you. Just a comment regarding to the coastal cleanup. Thank you to staff for putting it together, and a shout out to Andrea McHugh. The rain started about 10 a.m. I will now admit fault. I ran for the car. I went to go pick up Miss McHugh because she was up on Jog Road picking up trash. She refused and not only continued, went to the other side of the road and worked their way back to the park. So thank you. That's dedication beyond words. And thank you for everything you do.
I do have to add to that I think that drivers were deliberately driving close to the sidewalk so that they could splash me, and our fire rescue completely did me in when the rescue drove by, and completely, it just, the water was over my head. So,
Chief.
but
Chief.
no, it was wonderful. I'm sorry we didn't get to finish. I look forward to the next time.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Councilmember Noble.
No report.
Councilmember Dugo?
Nothing, sir.
Councilmember Diaz?
Just if any, I know that City Manager McHugh has already mentioned read for the record, but any residents that speak Spanish, there is also a version of the book in Spanish if anybody would like to read. I will be reading that day. I would love to see some of my fellow council members and any of our city residents to come out and read as well. It's very important to promote literacy. The book this year is Nigel and the Moon. And then the only other thing I have is if anybody has video of that incident with City Manager McHugh, that could get us $10,000
Do
on
the
funny
trucks
videos.
have video cameras?
There's our education scholarships. And that is all, thank you.
Councilmember Busquet?
I have a couple ideas I wanted to throw out there. Perhaps, if the council's interested in looking at this further, we could look into tiny homes as a way to deal with affordable housing or homelessness. Also, there are people that want to build mother-in-law homes behind their homes, and I think that we don't allow that. Maybe we could look at that, and we could help a few people out. The other thing is, I was driving through West Palm and looking at the amazing murals they have on some of their buildings. And I thought perhaps we could do an addition or a supplement to our property improvement and offer a small portion to businesses who might want to put murals on their walls, assuming that we're going to have approval of them. So I just want to throw that out and see if anybody else wanted to go further with it.
City Manager McHugh, on that note, do we assess a small fee to arts in public places, or is that something that we thought about or we haven't?
No, the art in public places, there is something as part of, that was presented by our Director of Development and Neighborhood Services, that a portion of the fees, development fees, will go towards art in public places. So that it's going to take a little bit of time for that to get established, but that was approved by the council. That fee structure was approved.
So we have some funds there available.
So I don't know, I guess it needs to be formalized and included in part of art in public places.
What we can do is, as part of art in public places, we can go through and look to see, I can work with the city attorney if they're aware of any municipalities that have something in place. I know that, I believe Lake Worth Beach actually has something in place related to that, and I think their assistant manager sent that to me a little bit ago. So we can look to see what they have and what the criteria for that is, what the approval process is, and bring that before the council for consideration as part of that program. And in addition to that, we do have a committee meeting this week to review the proposals that we did receive for the wall at Melaleuca and Haverhill.
Yay, finally. What about tiny homes and
Yep, that's something I can work with our Development and Neighborhood Services on and our city attorney and figure out, what that looks like based on our zoning, what's allowed, what's not allowed, and what we can potentially do and bring before the council for consideration.
I think we're going to have to make some changes. I don't think that they are allowed, but thank you.
I think Deputy Mayor Thorpe wanted to add something.
With regards to the art in public places, and I think we talked at one point about establishing a committee to review. I mean, if, Councilwoman Vizcaya, I think it's great. I think we should move forward, but I think at the same point, we talked about establishing a committee. I think we should move forward with that as well at this point.
All right, so I guess we'll bring that up for discussion. All right, for the mayor's report, I know that we had some firefighters go over to the West Coast, and I do want to recognize those individuals that took time out to go over there. So if we can do something for them, that would be very nice. In addition to promoting, obviously, the toy drive. So whatever we can do, that would be great. I thought that the cleanup was great. It rained. I bowed out too. So I saw the rain coming, and I saw gray for very long distances, and I didn't think that you guys were going to continue, but I know Michelle went back out there as well and kept cleaning. So we definitely thank you for that. Maybe I know this is an intercoastal, is a specific group, but maybe we should do these 2 times a year. Maybe one in the spring before it gets too warm, and obviously keep this date. But I don't know. I felt like it's a great community event. People like to get out there and do this, and a lot of young future leaders in that group. And I think it's always great to show them what leaders do: roll up their sleeves and go pick up garbage on the weekends. That's a form of leadership most people don't even think of. So that concludes the mayor's report. I'll
Motion to adjourn.
a motion to adjourn.